Okay, I know I'm late to the game on this, but I wanted to share my thoughts because there's too many Destiny fans that are watching my videos, and I need to shoo them away. So let's defend Jordan Peterson on every single thing he says. First, you have to think that Jordan Peterson did some armchair psychoanalysis on Destiny. I'm sure someone from Peterson's staff sent Jordan Peterson all of Destiny's worst clips, or the conversation he had with Dr. K, and Dr. K asked him if he was a sociopath. So Jordan Peterson is really, I think, got a conception of who Destiny is, and it's a very nuanced battle of, Adderall versus benzos. So I think it's fun.
So was there a game-like element to the debating, do you think? And is that part of why that morphing made sense?
No, I wouldn't say so. I mean,
He's asking how he got started in streaming, and right off the bat, Jordan Peterson's like, so it's a game. You play games. Do you treat debates like a game? Which I think Destiny definitely does. Not necessarily that's bad. I certainly do that as well. I make League of Legends videos related to politics. But it's funny how he rejects the framing, which is, a good move, but he kind of accepts it. And I do agree with him that you can just define game to mean anything.
And if you get really reductionist, everything in life is kind of a game, but that's not very satisfying. I think I grew up very argumentative. My mom is from Cuba, so my family...
Yeah, we know that. Okay, this is Peterson's critique of climate change that I believe is logical, but I haven't verified, and those are not the same thing. It's logical if the facts are true, but I don't know if the facts are true. So listen, I will go on a climate change arc at some point, investigate this further, but let's listen to the argument.
I think it's pretty undeniable at this point that there is an impact on climate across the planet. I think
that's highly deniable. We have no idea what the impact is from. We don't know where the carbon dioxide is from. We can't measure the warming of the oceans. We have terrible temperature records going back 100 years. Almost all the terrestrial temperature detection sites were first put outside urban areas, and then then you have to correct. Then you have to correct for the movement of the urban areas, and then you introduce an error parameter that's larger than the purported increase in temperature that you're planning to measure.
Okay, if that's true, which I don't know if it is or not, then that's point for Peterson, straight up.
This isn't data. This is guess, and there's something weird underneath it. There's something weird that isn't oriented well towards human beings underneath it. It has this guise of compassion. Oh, we're going to save the poor in the future. It's like that's what the bloody communists said, and they killed a lot of people doing it. And
Okay, we'll get into that in a second.
I don't think the increase in hungry people on the planet is because of climate policies.
Why not?
Because I don't think that countries in Africa are being pushed away from fossil fuels. I mean, most developing nations.
Of course they are. They can't even get loans from the World Bank to pursue fossil fuel development. And there's plenty of African leaders who are screeching at the top of their lungs about that.
Okay, this is 100% true, by the way. I watched this video.
Over the next decade, 2 decades, it is expected that there will be $150 billion worth of oil and gas extracted off your coast. It's an extraordinary figure, but think of it in practical terms. That means, according to many experts, more than 2 billion tons of carbon emissions will come from your seabed, from those reserves, and be released into the atmosphere. I don't know if you as a head of state went to the COP in Dubai.
Let me stop you right there. Do you know that Guyana has a forest forever that is the size of England and Scotland combined? A forest that stores 19.5 gigatons of carbon, a forest that we have kept alive, a forest that we have kept alive.
Does that give you the right? Does that give you the right to release all of this carbon?
Does that give you the right to lecture us on climate change? I am going to lecture you on climate change because we have kept this forest alive that stores 19.5 gigatons of carbon that you enjoy, that the world enjoy, that you don't pay us for, that you don't value, that you don't see a value in, that the people of Guyana has kept alive. Guess what? We have the lowest deforestation rate in the world. And guess what? Even with our greatest exploration of the oil and gas resource we have now, we will still be net zero. Guyana will still be net zero. With all our exploration, we'll still be net zero.
Powerful words, Mr. President. But
I'm not completed as yet. I am not finished as yet. I am just not finished as yet. Because this is the hypocrisy that exists in the world. The world in the last 50 years has lost 65% of all its biodiversity. We have kept our biodiversity. Are you valuing it? Are you ready to pay for it? When is the developed world going to pay for it? Or are you in the pockets? Are you in the pockets of those who have damaged the environment? Are you in the pockets, are you and your system in the pockets of those who destroyed the environment through the Industrial Revolution and now lecturing us? Are you in their pockets? Are you paid by them? Are you paid to keep their message?
Okay, this is where Peterson, I think, loses me a little bit.
Let's say that everything you've said is true. What do you think is the plan then? What is the goal? What is the drive? Like, why push obviously horrible ideas for the planet and the poor?
That's a good question. That's a good question.
Well, because you're positing it, right? So what do you think is the driver goal?
Well, I listen to what people say. Here's the most terrible thing they say. There are too many people on the planet. Okay, so who says that? I've heard people say that for 30 years. Perfectly ordinary, compassionate people. Well, there's too many people on the planet. And I think, well, for me, that's like hearing Satan himself take possession of their spine and move their mouth.
That's ridiculous, because that's a common phrase. People believe that. Bill Burr makes jokes about that unironically, like, all the time.
Nobody has the balls to come out and say it and just say, look, 85% of you have to go. That's it. I have been bitching about the population problem for 3 specials in a row.
So I think this is a little out of touch from Peterson. If someone said, there's too many people on the planet, I think that every time I'm in traffic. It's like, that's the voice of Satan. Is it more consequential when the WEF is preventing developing nations from using fossil fuels? Sure, but this is what makes Jordan Peterson out of touch by saying, well, it's literally the voice of Satan when people say that. It's like, it's not. Okay, I think Destiny gets the best of Jordan Peterson in this exchange.
But nuclear energy is a totally viable alternative to other forms of fossil
fuels. Then why
fuels.
does the radical left oppose it? You think it's just this
for the same reason the right opposes vaccines, because it sounds scary and it's a big thing and they don't trust it. It comes from
the right has a reason to distrust vaccines in the aftermath of the COVID debacle.
Well,
because they were imposed by force, and that was a very bad
You get to choose
idea.
if you have a nuclear power plant. That's imposed by force too, no? You don't get to choose where your energy comes from if you live in a country. You turn the light switch and hopefully you don't have a Chernobyl that melts down in your particular town, right?
Well, you get to choose it because you can buy it or not.
Well,
that's choice.
It's not true.
You cannot choose where you buy your energy from. It's where you are on the grid. You get whatever the energy is coming from on the grid.
Had a choice with the vaccines.
Nobody had a choice whether or not they lived near Chernobyl or not. Nobody's a choice. There's a nuclear power plant.
Away.
Well, how realistic is it to move like 500 miles? That's like telling conservatives when Biden tried to do the OSHA mandate for vaccines, you can just get a different job, right?
I don't want to debate about whether or not large nuclear power plants are...
Okay, yeah, Destiny just that straight up. Saying someone can move away if they don't want to be next to a nuclear power plant is just like saying, well, you can just get a new job if there's a mandate. That's both a form of force, so to speak, because you don't have much choice in it. So I think Destiny made that point brilliantly. Okay, here's the most meme-clipped moment of the debate that we'll talk about.
The outcome was that Hitler shot himself through the head after he married his wife, who died from poison the same day, in a bunker underneath Berlin while Europe was in flames. Well, he was insisting that the Germans deserved exactly what they got because they weren't the noble people he thought they were. And then you might say, well, Hitler's plans collapsed in flames, and wasn't that a catastrophe? Or you could say that was exactly what he was aiming for from the beginning, because he was brutally resentful and miserable right from the time he was, a rejected artist at the age of 16. And so he was working, or something was working within him, and something that might well be regarded as demonic, whose end goal was precisely what it attained, which was the devastation of hundreds of millions of people, and Europe left in a smoking ruin. And the cover story was the Grand Third Reich. And so there's no reason at all to assume that we're not in exactly the same situation right now.
I think there's a great reason to assume. I think that Hitler's motives and everything that he was trying to do wasn't a secret. I don't think that anybody had to guess that he was incredibly anti-Semitic, that his Aryan supremacy...
That's a very, in my opinion, foolish point by Destiny. The idea that, what he wrote in his journals and just publicly about, Jews and whatnot, that reveals his true motivations. It's like, no. That's not how the human mind works. We have a lot of unconscious, unknown reasons for what we do. And I think that statement by Destiny is actually indicative that he is driven by a lot of unconscious forces that he doesn't like to look at and understand why he's doing the things he's doing. I talk about politics so much because I grew up in a household saturated by conflict, and I was the mediator. So when I am looking at the left and the right and trying to be like, oh, but you're both right and both wrong, that's clearly an extension of what happened in childhood. And I don't know how much Destiny is willing to admit his childhood affects how he is today and the degree that the mistakes he makes are a consequence of him not recognizing that underlying motivation. This is all speculation, but my point is I think it's foolish to assume that we can judge someone's intent by what they say, because a lot of people don't know why they do the things they do.
I don't think you can compare like Hitler to people that are worried about climate change. The worry that I have here is because of
people in Germany thought Hitler was perfectly motivated by the highest of benevolent.
If I were to take this standard of
First off, this is not a new point by Peterson. This is exactly what he said in the Kathy Newman interview.
Under Mao, millions of people died.
Right.
I mean, there's no comparison between Mao and a trans activist, is there?
Why not?
Because trans activists aren't killing millions of people?
The philosophy that's guiding their utterances is the same philosophy.
The point he's making, which is I don't think anyone disagrees with, is that every single human being is capable of extreme levels of malevolence. Everyone is capable of becoming a Nazi if put in the wrong circumstances. And I believe that. And so even though this seems kind of, well, that's kind of crazy, I think it's a perfectly valid psychological point and one that was uncontroversial. Maybe not uncontroversial, but one that is not that controversial.
Evidence and apply this lens of analysis, couldn't I say the exact same thing about the conservative constellation of belief? They don't want to intervene anywhere in the world because they don't care about the problems there. They're anti-immigration because they hate brown people. Trump wanted to ban Muslims from coming to the United States because he's xenophobic. Conservatives don't want to have taxes to help the poor because they want homeless people to starve and die in the winter. But like, I feel like
Some of that's true. And yes, you can adopt that criticism. I think the difference with regards especially to the libertarian side of the conservative enterprise, but also to some degree to the conservative enterprise, is they're not building a central gigantic organization to put forward this particular utopian claim.
That's low-key kind of true.
And so even if the conservatives are as morally addled as the leftists, and to some degree that might be true, they're not organized with the same gigantism in mind. And so they're not as dangerous at the moment. Now, they could well be, and they have been in the past, but at the moment they're not.
That's correct. JBP for the win. JBP smacks up Destiny. Although, here's where I think Jordan Peterson makes a very strange argument about force.
How about if you're skeptical of anyone who's willing to use force to put their doctrine forward?
Then you're skeptical of literally every single person, political ideology ever have existed in all of humankind. Some degree of force, you would undoubtedly believe this, right? Some degree of force is probably necessary for any kind of cohesive society.
Yes.
Right?
No, I don't believe that.
Of course there is.
What?
No,
even if you had a tribe of
that.
100, 120 people, if somebody was stealing something, right? You have to punish that person.
I said earlier that becomes complicated when you're dealing with the psychopathic types.
Okay, but psychopaths make up 1 to 3% of any given population at any time. So that's why you would have to use force. Destiny's correct. And then Peterson goes, no. Two contrarians, two titans, benzos versus Adderall. And Jordan Peterson's just arguing to argue, it sounds like.
Right, so that's a complication. But I would say, generally speaking, that the necessity to use force is a sign of bad policy. And no, I don't think, I'm not particularly Hobbesian. I don't think that the only reason people comport themselves with a certain degree of civility in civilized society is because they're terrified by the fact that the government has a monopoly on force that can be brought against them at any moment.
I don't know. I'm kind of paternalistic in the sense that I think you can use force to influence behavior. Like if you make nicotine flavored vapes illegal, people will not hit the flavored vapes as often. And I'm speaking from experience here. And a lot of conservative morality is essentially centered around force. And I guess social taboos are not force per se. But this is just a very strange argument from Peterson.
I think that keeps the psychopaths in line to some degree. But I think that most people are enticed into a cooperative relationship, and that formulating the structures that make those relationships possible is a sign of good policy.
I have to ask, because I have watched a lot of your stuff in the past. I remember you speaking very distinctly on this, that, for instance, when two men are communicating with each other, there is an underlying threat of force that kind of puts on the guardrails those particular social...
Like the threat of force going on between these two. Destiny could beat Jordan Peterson's old man ass, I bet.
Interactions. For instance,
the threat of force is don't be psychopathic.
What is how broader is psychopathic here?
He's like the mobster. Don't be psychopathic, kid.
We defining
Well, I can define it. I mean,
Sure, yeah, go for it.
Well, a psychopath will gain short-term advantage at the cost of long-term relationship.
Okay.
That's really the core issue. Well,
That's odd because I thought psychopath was a specific genetic thing where you're like amygdala is smaller. This is my point. Of course, force is an acceptable and necessary part of society. And even if it's just to deal with psychopaths, the fact that they exist is just a fact. So this is Peterson being goofy as hell. And then I believe he quotes like this whole book of Moses and Moses like not using force when he should have or vice versa. And I'm like, that's just reading too much into it. I feel like you're just arguing to argue with destiny at this point. Okay, unfortunately, because of YouTube TOS, I'm going to skip the part about the certain medical procedures. But I will say a couple things. First off, I want destiny to be correct. I don't want all the people I know that got the jab to have medical complications. And I believe that the overwhelming majority of people who got it will be fine. Are there some questionable things around it? Probably. But I do want to play this clip because I think it's hilarious.
consequence of that was that we injected billions of people with an experimental, it wasn't a bloody vaccine.
Of course
No, it wasn't.
Yes, it was.
No, it isn't.
Yes, it is.
It's
What,
not.
because it have a 100% success rate? You think it's a definition of vaccine? The whole point of the vaccine is to give your body a protein
It's
to
not
train on
the
so that your
same
immune system works. in the future.
technology.
Who cares if it's not the same? There's
They
different
used
types
the word
of...
vaccine so that they didn't have to contend with the fact that it wasn't the same technology.
There are different types of vaccines
There certainly are,
that are
and
different technologies.
fine.
The mRNA vaccines is a type
This
of
used
vaccine
to be
technology.
vaccines. Now this is vaccines.
No, it was like this and now it's like this.
No. It was like this and now it's like this. The mRNA technology was a radical qualitative leap forward.
Yeah, that's funny. It's like this. No, it's like this. No, it's like this. Just two grown-ass men doing dick measuring contests. Funny, foul, logocentric, whatever Derrida or some postmodernist said about society. It's on display here. Anyway, fun stuff. Good luck and Godspeed.